What up, everybody? Sven Diesel here. We're going to be tying up a hare's ear soft tackle. I really like soft tackles, and I really like hare's ear, so why not combine the two and throw them onto a stealth hook. This is a C-Series, size 12. I usually fish these in 10 to 14s, maybe 8s, but we're going to be using some wax thread by Semperfli. This is in color red. Usually I want to use red, pink, orange, or yellow, because we're going to be building up a little bit of a head on this, and that's going to be the color. So let's start our thread and work our way back well into the bend, and we'll go ahead and trim out our tag end here. This is going to be covered up, so not critical that you use touching wraps, but it is nice to have a uniform body. Now we're using some premium partridge from Nature's Spirit, and this is just a natural. And what I do is I take a small feather like this, and I just kind of figure out I'm going to use about 5 to 6 fibers on each side. I'll take my scissors and I'll just notch out that stem. Now this allows us to play with a tail that will be the length of these fibers, and I like them to kind of going up so that it doesn't interfere with the bend of the hook, but basically do 3-4 wraps so you can still move it, adjust the length. You want them going down the bend, and we'll go ahead and, because I talked about uniformity, we'll go ahead and tie this all the way up so that it's a good, nice, solid body. You would do the same if you were going to do, a thread body, or wraps matter. Now we're going to go down the bend a little bit further. I left these a little bit longer because I'm going to naturally go down the bend here, just to help with the taper. And so those are some, it's a shorter tail. You could go longer if you want, but I like to keep it a little short for these. Now we're going to tie in some wire. This is just more to be fancy. This is 0.1 millimeter wire. It's a fine wire by Semperfli in pink, and it's just not necessary. It's not going to be, well, I guess it would be structural to hold the tinsel and hare's ear in place, but for this, we're just adding some pink to maybe create some sort of property that attracts the fish. I don't know. We're going to be using a size medium tinsel here. We're just going to tie this in along with the other wire, and we're going to tie it in, once again going for uniformity. And I probably, I could have been better about my thread wraps on this. Making sure to tie in a couple materials at once, but we're going to create a nice buggy body, and so not necessary. And I really like how this is looking, how the tail fibers are. I like that we've got them right there on the bend. Now we're going to be using some hare's ear with a little bit of ice dub in it. I really love this stuff. It dubs on the thread nice, and we'll basically take out a small clump, and we'll be creating a really sparse noodle. The thinner your noodle on your thread, the easier it is to taper the body, because if you put big clumps, you can't really regulate it, and if they're too thin, you're not really building a body. And so I like to start with it a little bit thinner here towards the hook, because that's where we're going to be tying it in. That's where I want it the thinnest, so we'll be doing more touching wraps there, whereas as we work our way up towards the eye, we'll be not doing touching wraps. And for security, I just do kind of a figure 8 here. I come down and then back up and over it. That way you're not building up a big bump there, but you're building a nice body. And now we're going more towards bulk, and I'm going to tie or dub some more dubbing onto here. You better start with less and add more than trying to take off. So dub a little bit more on, working on just still keeping that a thinner medium noodle on my thread, and we'll go ahead and spin this up. Man, this stuff just dubs on real nice. And we're gonna go all the way up until we get about maybe a hook eye and a half. We got to leave a little bit of space for tying in everything else we're going to be using and tying off everything. So Well, next we're going to just trim up any of the real buggy, longer fibers. You don't have to do this. This is more because of my OCD nature, because we're going to be ribbing this with the tinsel, and I always like to do one wrap before I get onto the material, and then make sure to come up and over. And sometimes it's a little difficult if it's a little bit of a hump, but use a little bit of tension here as you're pulling that, and create a nice segmented body with some flash. You can see the bugginess is coming through, and we'll go ahead and work our way up to almost where our thread is, and then go ahead and tie that off. And there is our tinsel. I'd fish this just how it is right now. Got a hot spot, head, tinsel. Man, we could stop here, but let's keep going. Now with the wire, I'm just going to follow up the tinsel, kind of trying to keep it on the one side and not, and I cut this way too long, and not trap down the bugginess of the hare's ear beneath this tinsel. So I'm kind of bringing it over and then pushing it up towards the hare's ear. And that way we're still having the buggy body. This just adds an accent color, something that might reflect in certain water conditions or lighting conditions. But the tinsel does that as well. So we'll go ahead and snip that out after tying it off. And next we're going to do a little ice dub. I'm going to do pink. And all I want of this is by Semperfli. Dubs on real nice. I'm just taking maybe 3, maybe 4 fibers. Doesn't need a lot, but dubs on real nice. I run it in a tighter noodle, something that the partridge can just sit up against and fan out rather than mat down. And we'll go ahead and work our way up there, and there's our little hot spot. Now when dealing with the head here, I don't want these smaller fibers getting in my way. And so I'm just going to go ahead and tie those in, forming a V, and I've kind of measured how many fibers I need. That's like maybe 1.5 to 2 turns. Might be a little dense, but you can always unwrap a little bit if it's too dense. And then we're going to just secure those. A little trick, if you get some fluff, just use the hook eye to push those up, and then you don't have those fibers trying to cover the eye. Now to hold everything in place, I'm just going to do a quick whip finish, just a 1 turn. That's just for making sure my thread doesn't fall off. But let's grab our hackle pliers and get ready, preen those fibers back, get a good grip, and let the hackle pliers kind of do the work. And we'll start rotating around, making sure to kind of not wrap over or top one another, but kind of work our way up towards the eye. And we got about 1 full wrap and a half, and I could tie this off on the bottom, but so you can see it, I'm just going to do it right here on this side and just do a wrap behind, and then we'll kind of move that forward and do a couple more wraps behind, maybe 1 or 2, and then a couple wraps in front, and it is secure. So we can go ahead and snip that out as flush as we can. And now that comes the part where we're going to build up a little bit of a head, and that's why I'm using red thread. Like I said, you could use yellow, orange, pink, anything that wants to pop. And we'll go ahead and just cover up any of that stem that's still left. And thread wraps do matter at this point, because you could build a head that's way too big, but having the right thread and the right type of thread really helps with this. And so I really like that head as is now. You got to remember, when you put a little bit of cement or resin on, it's going to increase the size just a little bit. And so we'll go ahead and whip finish that out, snip our thread, and I really like how this turned out. So we'll go ahead and put a little bit of resin on. Crap, this got too much still. I gotta knock this off. There we go. Just a little bit, and make sure to cover all sides, making sure not to cover up our hook eye. And we'll go ahead and cure that for 5 to 10 seconds. And that looks pretty good. So there's a lot of color combinations that are endless with this, but I still always go back to the natural partridge. Swinging this, throwing it under something weighted, or this is just a buggy looking spider, and should fish well. So hopefully you tie some up and it fishes well for you. Thanks for watching.